We welcome you to another episode of the legendary, the famous Andrew and Remington Steele Show, featuring Macbeth. It's the Andy and Remington Steele Show on a Tuesday night. It's the Andy and Remington Steele Show for your home delight. We're talking about Age of Sigmar and anything else that is cool. We're talking about Warhammer Fantasy. It's pretty easy to learn the rules. It's the Andy and Remington Steele Show on a Tuesday.
Now, you've been saying for many months now that it's easy to learn the rules. Have you actually learnt the rules yet?
Yeah, just by playing the game and listening to the Dungeon Master, Andy 2D6. But I can't say I've read them from front to back.
You can't say you've read those 4 pages from front to back.
Hey, listen, give me a dice and I'll do my duty.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Andy and Rem Show, episode 73, I believe. Still going strong. And during this dry spell of Age of Sigmar content, we've actually got something to sink our fangs into again this week with some terrain war scrolls, Remington's favourite part of any show, the war scroll analysis in depth. So, just in case Mr. Rem falls asleep from that onslaught of war scrolls, we've got Mr. Stew along with us as well. Hello there.
Hey guys, glad to be back.
What have you been up to lately?
Oh, this and that. I guess it'd be the time to show off.
Ooh!
Oh.
Wow! This is very adventurous for you, and it's Steve.
Well,
Coming out of the Chaos Wastes and into the Badlands.
I haven't. Do you remember last year Vince Venturello ran the budget of Sigmar?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this year it's started back up again. It's been a whole year. And for this one, I've decided to jump on board and do the Iron Jaws, but Nurgle-tainted Iron Jaws. So these guys are going to be all heavily converted, leaning towards Nurgle.
Wow, I'd love to see some of your painted minis, Stu.
I've done... I've posted some pictures on Google+. I've got some of them just sitting here. I'll try for the old hand behind the mini.
Oh,
Yeah, nice.
See, yeah, that's pretty well focused on there.
What do they like to paint? Good?
Really good, actually. I've never actually done orcs before, or orcs, sorry. So that was a bit different, but I'd also never used any of the technical paints. You know, the Rise of Rust, Typhus Corrosion, and what's the other one? Something oxide, Nilic oxide?
Nitrous oxide.
Nitrous oxide, yeah. I'd never used any of those before, so that was a bit of a kind of experience, but they're fantastic.
Wow,
really easy to do. So, yeah, really enjoying that so far.
Nice. And you're going to get one of those big, like, orcs on a giant crab thing?
The Maw Crusher?
Yeah.
No, I'm going to make one from scratch.
You're going to get a lobster shell?
Oh, close, actually. Because the army's going to be kind of nurgly, and I kind of figured that the Maw Crusher might be a little bit difficult to convert on its own, because it's kind of like a solid piece. I'm going to make one starting with a certain Tyranid model from 40k, and build up from there.
Is it going to be very, very nurgly and pustules covered?
Very.
I tell you what, Stu, I could tell you a cheaper way of doing it. Get a moss-covered stone and some seaweed.
Is that your $1 million idea of the week?
That's a Nurgle Maw Crusher for you on the cheap.
At least I wouldn't have to worry about it breaking in transit or anything.
Well, before we tell everyone what we've been up to, the people have had ample opportunity to get onto the active users list now, so let's see who we've got in the chat. We've got Andreas Goodmanson, Bazooka J Rambo, Dark Adrenaline, Demon _Lizard _From _Out of _Space, Dreaming Cyborg, Fluffy Dread, Gloom Dreader Gaming, Graham Rigg, Grave Danger, Mickey Genver, Auric Lovegod, Remington Steele. We've got Rob Lloyd, sweet. We've got Mr. Stew himself is in there, and Newbie. And there's Boa. So it's filling up by the minute. So, Mr. Remington, it's safe to say you haven't been painting anything this week. Anything wargaming related at all?
Well, yeah, my little wargaming club at school, they've really got into Gore Chosen. And the 3 lads I was playing against just ganged up on me, and I got killed in the first round. So then I had to sort of be games master. But they're really into it. I'd like to say I let them win, but I actually hadn't read the rules properly. So I just sort of dived in and got killed, and then that gave me a chance to sort of learn the rules.
That doesn't sound like you at all.
But yeah, they want to have another game tomorrow, but they want to... I haven't painted the miniatures yet, but what I have done, I have painted a Bloodstoker and the guy with the big standard bearer and a couple of heroes, the one you got in the White Dwarf. And those 3 are all extra characters you can use for Gore Chosen because they've got rules for them in the book. So I'm going to bring them down tomorrow. So we'll, they're all really nicely painted. So yeah, we'll have a game. They're into that. That's about it, really. Apart from Total War, which I'm ODing on at the minute.
Yes, another thing I've noticed, while you maybe haven't been doing that much wargaming, it seems like your facial hair construction, you kind of removed most of it, but you're trying to grow some kind of cheap Andy imitation by the looks of it.
No, I just forgot to do this bit. I'd said someone drew a picture of me at school. You take the mickey out of teachers, but they drew a picture of me, and I had loads of I looked like a, who's that guy? He does all the caricature drawings in those children's books. It will come to me in a minute, like the Twits,
Quentin Blake.
Yeah. He drew like a Clinton Blake monster with glasses and a beard. And anyway, seeing that, I thought, you know what? I've got too many grey hairs as well. So I thought, I'll have a go. Took years off me, right? Kids thought I was in my 20s. So
maybe that says something for the standard of education at that school rather than your parents.
It ain't the best, let me tell you that. It's a war, mate. It's a war.
Well, speaking of war, and total war, in fact, I finally got myself into a position to start playing that quite a bit now. And I started with the dwarves, just like you did. And Mr. Grimgore Ironhide, he just doesn't leave you alone, does he, right from the start? He's all over you.
No, you can't. You really kill him. You kill him, and then he just basically appears again somewhere.
I can't kill him. I wipe out his whole army. He's the only one left. I've got 300 troops circling him in the middle of the map, and he's fleeing to the edge of the map while everyone's just hacking him in the shins, and he slowly crawls his way off the map.
What I found was a good way of getting him. If you can get a cannon, just try and cannon him off, because he's not that well armoured. So you can get half damage off him straight off, and then you pile in there with Thorgrim Grudgebearer. So
yeah, Thorgrim is a beast.
Yeah, I'm really good with the dwarves now. I've pretty much come to the end of the campaign. I've done all my things I can do. I've destroyed the Greenskins, destroyed the Vampire Counts, the Crooked Moon Clan, destroyed Archaon twice, and now there's just a couple of northern tribes that I've ventured into their territory and fighting the war, taking the war to the Scalings and the Vargs. So I'm kind of out of things. And then the Empire got brave and thought they'd declare war on me, and I quickly subdued them as well until Karl Franz, sitting in his lonely Altdorf, asked for a peace treaty.
The Vampire Counts keep asking for peace treaties with me, even though they're at war with all my other dwarven allies. So then the other dwarves asked me to declare war on them immediately after the treaty. So if I keep accepting everyone's terms but asking for a little bit of gold each time,
yeah, absolutely,
work it that way.
Yeah. Get the gold up. Get your build up your technologies and that, and your fortifications. And I started an Empire campaign with Volkmar the Grim tonight, and I literally lasted half an hour before I was obliterated.
I assume you were auto-resolving all the battles of it, and it took half an hour.
Yeah, I was. But when you initiate a battle, you see the likelihood of winning, and it was so low that I just thought I'll just forget it. So
If it's so ridiculously one-sided, then I usually just skip it. But if it's pretty even, I always play it out.
if it's a really important one, sometimes you can just snatch a victory with some cunning tactics, and
That's
but
what I had to do.
the dwarves are a lot of fun to play, and they're really solid. But the Empire guys, they're just not as tough, mate.
The dwarves are just so slow. It's an accurate representation of the tabletop, though, because they're not going anywhere fast, are they? You think, oh, I'll deploy these sneaky miners in a flanking position so that as the enemy march forward, I can hit them in the flank. And then the enemy are already like 3 miles past that point by the time the miners actually get there.
Well, what you can do, you can split the miners up, and try and get behind them as well, and don't get the miners too far away from yourself. That's my. But very soon you'll get miners with blasting charges, and they're a lot more powerful. You know.
Mm.
So
Well, I killed Azhag the Slaughterer on foot as well.
yeah, nice.
Not quite mounted on his wyvern, which I thought was interesting. I was expecting him to be swooping in, and then he was just jogging along really slowly on his own.
What worked for me was try and get Zufbar, the territory Zufbar, because that you can buy lots of gyrocopters with brimstone guns and gyro bombers, and they were brilliant for me. I bought loads of them. Just completely, you tend to micromanage those because you can drop bombs on units, and it's really addictive. Yeah.
I like the fact there isn't that much micromanagement in the game. Even the hero abilities, you click them once, and then you don't have to fiddle with them too much because they all have quite a long countdown on them before you can use them again. So you don't have to be constantly managing all your heroes all the time.
It's
so I like
just,
that.
I don't know if you played it yet, Stu, but it's just such a brilliant game. It takes you right back to 8th edition, and just you realise the richness of the lore.
I've played it a bit, yeah, but I've not got it for myself yet. But yeah, it's one of those games I'm earmarking for booking time off of work, just so I can properly get into it.
Oh, it's great, mate. I mean, it's just.
Did they not release the Beastmen as a faction?
Yeah, they've got their own campaign.
Oh, do they?
You can have them as well. Yeah, it's called An Eye for an Eye, where it's basically your Khazrak One Eye, and you've got your sworn enemy is Toddbringer.
Oh, Boris,
It's like in the end times, and so ultimately you've got to defeat him.
Are they any good, or are they just?
I played about an hour with the Beastmen. Yeah, they're all right. They're fast. The Centigors are the fastest unit in the game. I'm telling you.
I haven't had to fight the Beastmen yet. They're skulking around on the map, but they haven't actually attacked me yet. So I'm quite glad about that.
They're just. Do you know what? They're just treated in the game exactly like Games Workshop used to treat them. in all the fluff, you know, basically. They rise up and they get pummeled every time.
We've got a comment on this game here from Mr. Tom Wilson, who says, no matter what faction I play as the dwarves, always crush me. They are so overpowered. Well, maybe that's why you're doing so well, Mr. Rem, because you're playing as the dwarves. And the moment you dipped your toe into a different faction, you immediately got destroyed in half an hour. So maybe there's some truth to that. Well,
at the start of the campaign, when you're choosing the factions, it says your starting point, whether it's easy, difficult, or hard, just like in the other Total War games. And if you're the dwarves, they have the easiest starting position because they're so protected. And not many people can get to them easily.
And you're surrounded by a lot of friendly factions as well.
Yeah. But the latter game is a little bit trickier because you're so slow.
They did announce the Bretonnians earlier today, I think. I saw something on Facebook.
Oh, yeah, I saw the...
Right.
Yeah, they're releasing like another version of the game in a few months' time, but the Bretonnians will be free to the people that already own it.
That's great.
Something about Wood Elves as well soon.
Wow. Well, Bretonnia are already in the game. They do already have a faction, but you can't play as them. So you have King Leon Couleur, and he's really hard to negotiate with. But
is it the accent?
Yeah, he has a French accent. But there are obviously in the Bretonnian lands. There's big forests, so you're thinking, the Wood Elves there, you know. So that's makes sense that they're going to come next.
Indeed. Now, shall we actually look at some new releases now? Now, Mr. Remington, you drew my attention to something, which I'm going to bring up on the screen share now before we get to the GW site. I've got something else here, first of all. Now, this is just a blog that you found, presumably. And there's a lot of stuff here from the Open Day, Hobbit stuff. So, a new rule book. And the most interesting thing, bypassing the miniatures was the terrain. Because some of this looks pretty tasty.
Yeah, this is
People have already been putting this stuff on their Mordheim terrain list. Look at that, it's pretty juicy, isn't it?
It's brilliant, and it is rumoured to be priced at only 25 quid.
Is that for all this here?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's amazing, isn't it?
Wow.
You can put that on anything. But apparently it's Forge World that have kind of taken the Hobbit mantle.
They have, yeah. I think they're doing pretty much all the Hobbit-based releases now, Forge World.
Okay.
It's pretty juicy, though.
I'd have expected it to be maybe twice that price if it's Forge World that's making it.
Me too. So, but yeah, these are definitely good for Age of Sigmar, or 9th edition or 8th edition, whatever. More time.
Yeah.
Very juicy indeed. And terrain is, of course, the subject of the week because on the GW website here in the pre-order section, first of all, we've got the official confirmation of £20 for that base pack.
Yeah, we covered that last week, didn't we?
Yep. We've got the Khorne Battle Mat Scenery Bundle for only £105. But then we've got the terrain pieces, which are confirmed as £10. You thought they were going to be a bit more, but they are in fact 10. So before we get to them, though, let's have a quick look at some of this stuff. So they're dice, of course, which have the skulls on the 1, whereas the Forge World dice have the skulls on the symbol on the 6. So
I looked at those ivory ones, and they have a kind of effect on each number. So when you spin it, it looks like it's kind of swirling. Well, that's what it says. It says somewhere there, or maybe it was my imagination.
With it featuring an attractive swirl effect.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you have to see them in action. You'd think they would put a little video up if there's some kind of weirdness to do with them when you're rolling them around.
I think they're the ones for me. I like those.
They've got into the business of wound trackers as well now.
Now these look a bit awkward to me. I like the ones you use, Andy, with the sort of the
little dials. Yeah, I'm not sure what the deal is with these exactly. With them being, I think they're D10s, so it wouldn't be that apparent which side is actually facing up sometimes.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be particularly useful.
I think it's geared towards how many wounds it's taken rather than how many it has left, maybe.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird thing, isn't it? Especially in Age of Sigmar, because you've got the rules that say how many wounds you've taken affects your stats. But then if you don't know how many wounds you've got left, you have to keep looking back to the war scroll, don't you, for that? So yeah. I like to keep track of how many wounds the model has remaining, but then that's not easier. That's not very easy to cross-check with the rules changes.
Yeah. What about you, Stu? Are you a wounds taken or a wounds left?
Usually wounds left.
Yeah.
It seems to be a bit easier for me to figure things out, but I guess,
And I can see these just rolling away. You nudge those, they're just going to go rolling, aren't they? It's not like a solid D6 with just a big square on the floor. It's just going to be rolling everywhere when you nudge it, isn't it? So I'm not a big fan of those. However, let's look at these terrain pieces now, shall we? Because this is the big Age of Sigmar news. Now, this stuff was available before, and it's been re-released. And it now has some new shiny rules, or kind of modified rules, shall we say. So the Balewind Vortex. Let's zoom in, shall we?
Does anyone remember how much that used to be when it was first released?
Was it like £25 for 2 of them, or £30?
It sounds about right.
Well, £10. A Balewind Vortex consists of a single model. That's not very narrative, is it? Well, anyway, it's a swirling vortex of magical energy that can be summoned by a wizard. So, here's all the lowdown on the Balewind Vortex. It's a spell to summon it into play. However, if you cast it, then it doesn't affect the number of spells you can cast. So you can cast this and cast something else. It has a casting value of 7. If you successfully cast it, your wizard essentially sits on top of it and can't be hit by anything. He can be shot, but he can't actually be bashed in the face in close combat. And then when he casts spells from the top of it, I think he gets a casting... Is there a casting bonus attached to it? Add 1 to the casting and unbinding rolls for a wizard atop the Balewind Vortex. So it makes him much harder to hurt, and he also gets that bonus as well for sitting on it. It's pretty tasty. However, they did amend the rule so that monsters can't use it now, because apparently people were using it for like your big kind of greater demon characters, like your fate weavers and so on, were sitting on it, which you can't do now because they can't be a monster. It just has to be a standard wizard hero. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, but still, there's not really any, other than the range of it, there's not really any downside. Which, if they're planning on selling a lot of models, you wouldn't really expect much of a downside. But
you're not paying any more points for it. You just need to own the model.
Yeah.
And then your wizard has access to that spell, so he can just get himself into a favourable position, cast the Vortex, and just sit on it and go nuts.
Yeah, I'd say if you have that model, absolutely, no reason not to use it.
And it's only £10, so there's no excuse for everyone not to own one.
Yep.
Mr. Remington, do you think you're going to be getting one of these for maybe your Wasgog, Wurzgul, whatever his name is?
I don't know, what can it do again? I got turned off there. Were you reading that? You can't go near it, and you can stand on top of it.
You can stand on top of it with the wizard who casts it, and then people can't just charge you. Then they can only shoot at you.
Well, you don't really charge your wizard anyway, do you? You always shoot him.
Well, it depends if you're against Bloodbound or someone else that doesn't really have shooting attacks.
Okay. Yeah. I guess it's all right. It's fun, isn't it? Another piece to it. Let's have another look at it, Andy. Another picture. Let's have another look at that.
This is the Balewind Vortex.
And you can kind of like paint the swirls according to your army. It's kind of cool.
And of course, you don't even have to use this model technically, although don't let GW hear you say that.
I mean, you could like cut off the pointy bits or like bend them down so it looks like they're kind of melting.
There it is, surrounded by some of the old Nurgle goodies.
In fact, I would bend those arrows up so it's more like a cage. Kind of cool.
Anyway, for £10, pretty damn good. It looks nice, good rules, good price. Why not buy one? Unless you play Stormcast or Dwarves, who wouldn't be able to use it. Okay, next up, let's have a look at the Mage Wrath Throne. So this is also £10, which seems like another good price for this juicy piece of kit.
It looks very Vampire Council-ish, doesn't it?
It does a bit, doesn't it, with the wings on the back there. It's got a lot of scullage on it as well.
You could convert that into a casket of souls, couldn't you?
You could do a lot of conversions with this thing.
Now, the
nice
weird
statues on it.
The weird thing for me, Andy, is the rules are about sitting on the throne, aren't they? But the problem is most models are standing up. So
you can stand in a kind of next to the throne. It's like the musical chairs. And just imagine the music's playing while the game's going on.
That'd be a good scenario, wouldn't it? If the gaming table has just about 12 mage thrones on it, and you're just playing musical chairs with your figures.
You would have to buy 12 of them first. So, when you are sitting upon the throne, you get various abilities. For example, all of the heroes from your army within 15 inches can use their command ability, which is nice. There aren't too many abilities in the game that give you access to that. I can think of there's something for dwarves that couldn't do that. There aren't too many of them out there, though. And subtract 2 from casting rolls made for enemy wizards that are close to it. And then, just by sitting on it, then you roll a dice in the hero phase. And if you roll a 1, it's going to hurt you. And if you roll a 2, it's going to hurt an enemy unit within 15 inches. So, nice. If you've got a kind of little... It has to be a hero. So if you've got just a cheap hero that maybe doesn't want to be getting too close to the action, but within 15 inches of the action on his throne, then he could sit on this. And you do not roll on the scenery table, so there's no random abilities attached to these pieces of terrain. You know exactly what you're getting with them. And the random abilities is something that we're going to be talking about shortly, by the way, because I've found that a lot of the time people don't actually use them during games. So what do you think of this throne? Do you think you'd be picking up one of these guys?
So you wouldn't have it in your army, would you? Because it can't move.
Well, this would just be on the table somewhere.
Right, all right. So it could be like an objective, couldn't it? sit on the throne for the longest amount of turns or something.
Certainly could.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
£10 each. I could see myself getting these definitely for that price. Nice cheap pieces of terrain. But first of all, before we look at some of the existing pieces of Age of Sigmar terrain, let's talk in general terms for a minute. So, do you guys like using the random terrain effects on the terrain, or do you just kind of not use them? Because I've found it's quite a lot of hassle to remember. And then especially the ones that have kind of an area effect. The only time I actually remember to use it, usually all of Remington's units become befuddled. That's the only time it actually comes up. The rest of the time, effects like if you run or charge through it, you might die. People just don't run or charge through it. So that doesn't really affect too much. And yeah, I'm not a huge fan of using them in games because you've got enough to keep track of with your own army a lot of the time. So also having the terrain with its own set of special rules, I think, is a bit much sometimes.
Yeah, I agree.
Same. I really like the idea of it at first, with everything being, mystical or dangerous in some way, but it's a bit much. You're using it all of the time. If one or two terrain pieces on the board have these rules, then that's fine. But in general, to me, terrain is still just terrain.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I prefer to using a hill. Because then if you're, if you're charging down, you get a bonus, or you know what I mean. Where it's more of a positive thing that you'd want to use, whereas the terrain effects in Sigmar are kind of like they're just an annoyance.
It's kind of an inconvenience. What I would prefer, the terrain pieces that they actually release, I like the rules for those, other than occasionally having to put random effects on them. But when you've got your own little piece of terrain, like, for example, a hill, or you've made your own little graveyard or something, then you can apply a random effect to that, and it's only a couple of pieces on the table then, rather than the entire board. You're having to constantly measure to see how far you are from every terrain piece at the start of the turn, which gets a bit crazy. So, let's have a look at some of the other pieces that are out there now, and just talk about what we think about the existing terrain. So, first of all, of course, there's the Chaos Dreadhole. This is just the Malefic Gate part of it, but there's a lot of other pieces as well. I think when this came out, we established it was a bit too, dare I say, corny, this whole fortress. There's an awful lot of skulls on it, and we thought it was probably a bit much. Do we still have that opinion of it, especially for the price? It's a bit too single-purpose.
I mean, it is magnificent when you see it at Warhammer World. When you see the whole thing put together, it is amazing. But it's massive, man. It's epic.
It might, sound strange coming from a mainly chaos person, but it's the kind of thing that I would love to play on, but would never buy myself. Because it is just a bit, it's a bit too chaosy. It's a bit too kind of single-use kind of thing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think if you could remove the skulls, then you could make it like a Tower of Nagarond, couldn't you? You could make it different things.
The big thing for me would be I just couldn't be bothered painting it. I would rather do a whole bunch of minis rather than a terrain piece of that size and with that much detail on it.
I imagine it wouldn't have been that difficult to build it, to create it in such a way that the skulls were kind of an insert piece. And then you would have other insert pieces with a different top on it. Like you'd have your standard castle, you'd have your skulls, you'd maybe have like pustules if you wanted to make it nurgly. You could have some kind of celestial iconography to make it a Stormcast fortress. And then the top of the walls would also be optional as well, so you wouldn't have to have the spikes. It would have been very easy to make it multi-purpose with not that many more sprues. And then you could sell like your elf upgrade pack that you could put with the fortress to make it in a different way. I think that's kind of a missed opportunity. So I don't think too many people actually own these. It's nice to play on at somewhere like Warhammer World.
Yeah.
Probably not on many people's shopping list. At the price you have to pay for it as well. Just £60 for a gate, and then you're going to need an entire fortress to go with it.
Well, it works out as maybe thousands of pounds, doesn't it, to get the whole thing?
If anyone out there owns the whole thing, then let us know, and you'll go down in history as a legend. Okay, So Sylvaneth Wildwood. Now this is the set that obviously has 3 lots in it, so it's a bit more expensive. You can just buy them in lots of 1. So obviously, I'm sure all of us have experienced the Sylvaneth forces and the rules that they have associated with the Wildwoods. So obviously the question comes up, how much should you put on a table? Because they're quite reliant on it. So how do you feel about terrain that really just benefits one faction over the others, and how much of it you put down on the table? What do you think about that whole conundrum?
It does benefit you if you're in the forest, doesn't it? Right? You get.
It depends though, because if you're in it, then they have certain abilities that can hurt you just from being in it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not playing Wood Elves, then I think it's a great terrain piece. It's kind of, I'd even say it was essential, having a wood on the table. They look brilliant.
If you're playing against the Sylvaneth, it's definitely something you have to limit. Yeah.
Nasty.
Obviously, you can't have the terrain lending an advantage to one person over the other. It's not really.
Well, in me and Andy's
fair.
games, we did it. I was playing the Orcs, and the whole purpose of my army was to destroy those woods. So, I get to destroy them. So it kind of like starts off like, yeah, they give you a big advantage, but if you've got the ability of burning them down, then it kind of it makes it a bit more fun. But if they're permanently up there, then you're at serious disadvantage, aren't you? So you can get like tree men and tree things just popping up all over the place.
Yeah, because they do seriously benefit the Sylvaneth. Like even just moving, if you run or charge across them on the roll of a 1, you just die unless you're Sylvaneth monster or hero. So, yeah. How many do you think is a fair amount on, let's say, a 6x4 table if one side is Sylvaneth? Because obviously you've got to have some, otherwise you lose out on a lot of their abilities.
No more than 4 for me. I mean, I don't mind the teleporting, as long as if they teleport, they can't do anything for the rest of the turn. But I don't know if it's like that. I think they can teleport and then charge in and fight you, or teleport and do magic.
It must be an interesting one for tournaments, because obviously there are going to be some Sylvaneth players there, but just how much of it do they put on each table? You'd imagine there are going to be some tables that have 0 Sylvaneth Wildwoods on them.
Yeah.
Just because it doesn't tie in with the theme of the table. So is it just complete chance when you take Sylvaneth to a tournament?
I reckon it must be. They're not going to just throw Wildwoods on every table just in case a Sylvaneth player shows up. And if they did, that would kind of be unfair to everyone else who hasn't taken them.
With the Wildwoods, is there a way you can pay to put them into your army, the Wildwoods? I'm not sure if there is. I know there's no point charge for the Balewind Vortex, but I think there definitely used to be something about the Wildwood where you could pay extra to get it in there. And of course and a couple of people are saying they have the ability to summon them.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was going to say that. I may be misremembering, but I think they could summon.
If you're using all your spells up to summon Wildwoods when on another table there's already a ton of Wildwoods on there, then it's definitely putting you at a disadvantage, isn't it?
Well, you used to have to pay for the Acorn of Ages magic item, and that allowed you to grow up to D3 Wildwoods, but at least you're paying for that.
It's definitely an interesting topic, and I would be interested to hear what tournament organisers do.
If they aren't putting any on the table and just letting the Sylvaneth players summon them themselves, then that's different. That's fine. But starting out with them as well as being able to summon them seems a little bit much. Unless there's other terrain pieces that benefit other armies on the boards as well.
Mr. Demon_Lizard says you get 1 free Wildwood for Sylvaneth Allegiance. So that's a start. But again, if one table has 4 and one doesn't have any, it's a difference between 1 and 5 then, isn't it? So, interesting one. Next up, we've got the Baleful Realm Gates. Now, we've used these quite a bit, and certain people on this show have had, let's say, less than good luck with them. And they roll those infamous skull dice and let out the cry of Remington that usually results in 1 popping up on the dice. Giants and trolls have been swallowed whole by these things, but they do give you the luxury of just teleporting anywhere around the edge of the table, pretty much. So how do we feel about the old Baleful Realm Gates?
Yeah, I like them, man, because anyone can use them.
Yeah, same.
I'm not sure about being able to go through it and appear anywhere on the board. I think you should have to appear in and out of another gate.
Yeah, I would agree. I think being able to just pick a table edge is, I don't know, it doesn't seem quite to make as much sense in a kind of, especially in a kind of narrative game, than it would to just appear out of the other realm gate.
I do quite like the idea of you just having to pop between the two realm gates. But maybe if they're going to leave in the fact that you can just appear on any table edge, then maybe it's like an even more perilous journey. Like if you roll a 1 or a 2 when you're doing that, then the model could die. Yeah. That would be an interesting way of doing it. We'll have to try out something like that in one of our incredibly narrative-driven games, won't we? Yeah, they're very nice centerpiece as well. I think they're maybe the best-looking terrain piece they've got, because you can really go nuts with the nice flamey effects in here.
Yeah, the pieces they look great. They don't benefit any one army over the other, and they have that really hilarious effect of what happens if you roll a 1.
Remington knows all about rolling 1s through the baleful realm gates. He knows
he's not the only one that's lost a giant in there.
Well, if you're going to take the risk and send a giant through it, you're asking for trouble, aren't you?
True.
Next, we've got the Numinous Oculum, which I've always found a little bit weird and fiddly, because you've got obviously the little platform in there, but it's not that easy to fit a model in there, because you've got this kind of this dome around it. Obviously, you can stand up on this wall bit, but this, and I have a similar issue with the Dragon Fate dais as well, it's a very small area that you're supposed to fit models into. It's not ideal.
I don't kind of get the rules for this, because I thought it would be like you put a wizard into the sphere and he like charges his magic and he can summon things, or he can become more powerful, but I don't think it does that, does it?
Well, shall we have a look right now? So a wizard within 3 inches of it can draw upon the power within it, add 1 to casting and unbinding rolls.
Well, that's naff, come on.
There's more though. If wizards that are within 3 inches of it can attempt to cast Piercing the Veil spell, and this is in addition to other spells they're normally allowed to attempt. Now, does that mean it's one of their spells that they're allowed, or are they allowed an extra spell? I'm not actually sure, because it says in addition to any other spells they're normally allowed to attempt. So it seems like this is just a separate thing.
I'd say it was just an extra.
Yeah, extra. So Piercing the Veil, casting value of 5, so nice and easy. A Glimpse into the Future can change the result of any 1 dice roll made for the caster or another friendly model to the result of your choosing until the next hero phase. So that is actually very good.
Yeah.
That's the ability that one particular the Chaos character has, that you can pretty much take if you have the Numinous Oculum on the table. You got Wizard within 3 inches of it. So that's quite a good one. I'm sure someone who's notorious for rolling 1s very much likes that ability as well. And it also has the Zone of Nullification as well, so that when you're affected by an enemy spell within 6 inches of it, then on the roll of a 5 or more, then it has no effect. So,
yeah. I'd like to see something bit like, you put a model in there and he can he can do his chant, and then maybe on a roll of a 5 or 6, he turns into a demon prince, or if he fails it, he just kind of turns into a slug. That'd be cool. No? Right.
Not sure about that one. Turning into a slug. We'll see. Okay, we've got the Garden of More, which I'm very, very surprised they haven't just cut it in half and called it the Garden of Less and charged £25 for it. But that hasn't happened yet. Maybe I shouldn't say it too loud and give them ideas. But of course, this is quite an old piece as well. And another one that's kind of difficult to navigate through. It was a nightmare trying to use something like this in 8th edition. You just have to use it as a solid, impassable piece, really. Unless you've just got one character that can run through it and it essentially just hide from everything. Obviously easier now, but it's still not ideal for certain base sizes of miniatures if you're going to set it up like this. Of course, you can spread out the pieces a bit. But £30 for that, I always thought that was reasonable value because you get quite a lot of terrain in there. And of course, this actually takes you to this whole thing here. So this is where the rules for the Arcane Ruins and the Balewind Vortex, which has been changed now, of course, is in there.
You can't get the ruins anymore, or the chapel.
You can actually get the Arcane Ruins. They brought those back as well.
Yeah, the ruins are still on the website.
Oh, wow. All right, there you go. Cool.
Yeah, so they're pretty tasty. And where is the... There we go. The Garden Moor. So for this one, this has a lot of things that benefit death. So maybe if you're playing Sylvaneth versus Death, then you could have a nice Garden Moor in the middle surrounded by some Sylvaneth Wildwoods. Another one of those terrain pieces that just benefits a faction in particular. So it's good for narrative games, but now that they've brought in points, it can kind of unbalance games if people are looking to have perfect balance, which generally they're not if they're like us, but people who are playing in tournaments, for example, probably wouldn't be too thrilled if there's a Garden of Moor on your table and then someone just plops down a Death Army in front of you. There's the old Mage Wrath Throne, Sylvaneth Wildwood. Yeah, this is very handy, this PDF here. If anyone wants to see all the various terrain pieces that were previously available. The Scenery War Scrolls Compendium. Okay, now the Dragon Fate Dais, which I of course own, and we've used its special rules occasionally. So there's not that big of a space in the middle there. You can fit a Stormcast hero on foot. That's about the biggest you can go. And you can't really stand too easily on the steps. There's a lot of balancing going on. But it does look nice, and it's difficult to fit underneath as well, I should say. So the fact that you have to be on it to get one of the abilities from it, I don't think you have to be completely on the terrain, though. You just have to be kind of touching it. And it gives you an extra armor save in addition to being on terrain as well, as far as I recall. So I always thought this is a fairly cool one, but a lot of the abilities for this one are related to being a priest, I think. So, yeah, if you don't have priests, then a lot of these abilities are kind of lost on you. I think that's quite a nice looking one. The Ophidian Archway, this is probably next on my list of potential purchases for terrain. I think this is quite a good one.
It looks amazing, that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I really like that one.
I like the kind of swirling dragon necks.
You can attach it to the Nimbulus Oculum as well.
Very, very tasty. And
I love
this...
those terrain pieces like that really give you a good idea of what the mortal realms actually look like the kind of architecture and stuff. Helps you kind of picture it a bit easier in your head.
Yeah. The one thing I really like about this piece is that it's kind of unobtrusive. It's basically just a wall. Look at that. It doesn't take up too much space. You can be standing right on that side of it. You can be standing right on that side. It's not filling the board with something that's difficult to stand on, if you know what I mean. It's mostly flat, and I kind of like that about it. Also, the little platform up there as well, which there's quite a bit of foot space. Let's just have a look at the rules for that quickly. So, here we go, the Ophidian Archway. So, this thing has the following rules, so you do not roll. It has Sinister on it, which we already know what that does because it's one of the random terrain effects. It's got Shelter. If all models are within 3 inches of it, then the unit receives the benefits of cover against attacks made by models that are on the other side of the archway, which is nice. So you don't have to actually be on the terrain, you can just kind of hide among it. And then you've got Awaken the Graven Carvings, which, now this is an interesting one, if I remember. So in your hero phase, a hero that's within 3 inches of it can attempt to awaken the spirits. Select an enemy model within 6 inches, and roll the dice. The result is greater or equal to than the model's bravery. It is struck down and slain. But if it's a 1, however, you roll a second dice, and then you apply that to the model that attempted it, I think. So, quite an interesting one. If you want to kill a goblin or an ungor, it's quite easy on the other side of the wall. And I think that one, as far as gameplay, this one probably gets my pick, along with the Realm Gates as well, as just not taking up a huge amount of space on the table, but also being useful and functional. So I'm definitely going to have to pick up one of these at some point, I think. So, what do we think then, lads? What's your favourite terrain piece we've got available at the moment? What would you like to see that we don't have, perhaps?
I do like that one, but it's just a little pricey, I think. £25. A bit pricey for that.
What else?
I don't know. For all the detail that's actually on it, That's probably. I know it's not the biggest terrain piece, but it certainly is one of the prettier ones.
Yeah.
What do you think we could do with seeing in the future that we haven't seen yet, as far as Age of Sigmar terrain goes?
Something bigger, maybe the kind of Dreadfort or Dreadhold size, but just not chaos, not necessarily Stormcast, but something from the kind of the human inhabitants of the mortal realms, their equivalent of a castle or something. A kind of something fairly generic that could fit in with any army and on any board.
Generic's always good. I think something Stormcast specific would sell well enough, just because they're probably the most popular army. But I'm not sure what it would actually be. For any fluff experts, I'm sure you two know a bit more than me. What kind of terrain would the Stormcast have?
Just like pillars, magical pillars, lightning pillars.
Yeah, mostly a giant, some kind of, I don't know, maybe something that would be actually kind of floating above the board. Some kind of tower or something, kind of like the Vortex, where it's kind of the platform is raised up. Maybe something similar to that, but raised by lightning kind of thing.
I wouldn't mind GW releasing their own set of floating islands.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people make them, but if they actually came out with something and they made it sturdy enough so it would actually stand up properly and not just topple over.
Yeah, it'd be cool that we're playing on different levels, or you could have one terrain board that's mines, and then the surface part as well. So it could have 2 levels. That's great for Skaven as well.
If you have really big interconnecting floating islands, you could have one realm gate at the top, one underneath, just pass between them to get from level to level.
Yeah, that'd be good, mate. I was thinking, like, what about a well? Like, like the Well of Life, or the Well of Nurgle, or the Well of the Lambton Worm. You know what I mean? It's like something could come out of the well, or you could drink from the well and get wounds back. What about that?
The Well of Life.
Did either of you get the most recent White Dwarf this month?
No, it was all 40k, wasn't it?
Oh, a good bit of it, but there was a battle report in it between 2 Age of Sigmar armies, like Stormcast and Ironjaws, and there's little statues on the board that haven't been seen before.
Oh.
They're like statues of the little golden statues of these kind of like sea creature looking things with like long necks and big kind of frilled heads, but they're holding like a spear and a shield. And I'm guessing they're going to release them at some point, unless that's just something custom made at the studio.
Do you know, that reminds me, just playing Total War, the faction of Marienburg has a symbol just like that. Kind of looks like a mermaid / Medusa.
Yeah, it's pretty similar.
That's a symbol of Marienburg, that is. So it might have been an older piece, but yeah, it sounds good, man. Like statues. I said pillars, didn't I? Yeah, statues of.
It was certainly something I hadn't seen before. It could have just been something that was lying around in their studio for years and years. You never know.
At Warhammer World, they've got some great terrain pieces made from models, and they like the Empire Griffin.
Yeah, that's a really nice one.
Yeah, and it looks like a statue because they've just sort of sprayed it gold and rusty like.
Statues are definitely something that have been underrepresented in GW terrain, aren't they?
Yeah, and you think about history, it's full of statues, isn't it? Like ancient Egypt. It's all about that. Is that whiskey you're drinking, Stu? Straight out the bottle. Look at that.
No.
Yes, it is. You're on the brandy and whiskey, ain't you? Up there, Macbeth, alone in your castle, drinking yourself to death.
Not quite that much of a stereotype, yeah.
I think you're going to have to confirm what is actually in that bottle.
It's actually honey-flavoured beer. So it's not a million miles away from whiskey, to be fair.
So it does contain some alcohol then. So alcohol consumption has now been seen on this show, which probably means that it's no longer advertiser friendly. You've just cost me 12 pence.
I'll send you the 12 pence.
I certainly hope you will.
Believe me, Andy counts every penny.
I certainly do. Okay, now I think it's time for Mr. Remington's favourite part of the show now.
Oh, what would that be, Andy?
I hope the audience are prepared to identify a single piece of terrain. I hope you're ready, because it's going to be heavily zoomed in on that single piece of terrain, and it may or may not be something that's currently available, but it is a piece of terrain that either in the past or now has been sold by GW. So the first person to get this one terrain piece, first person to type in the name of it, or very close to the name of it, will be put onto the prize pool list. So are you ready with that theme song, Mr. Remington?
Yeah. What the hell is that? 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 Only Andrew and Remington know.
There we go. Look at that. It's a lot of grey, isn't it?
It's flagstones.
Well, you would think maybe it's not even a piece of terrain, looking at it that way.
Is it from outside your doorstep, Andy?
It is not. We've got some guesses already. Fluffy Dread says Skullvein Manse. Nope. Rob Lloyd Sweet says Dreadstone Blight. Nope. Dice Miniature Paint Guy says Garden of Moor. Nope. Barrett Muscleman says Mighty Fortress. Nope. Come on, somebody's got to get this. It's only one single piece. Newbie thinks it's his backyard. No, I wouldn't dare get close enough to take a picture of that. Let's see. Any other guesses coming in? Come on, folks. Fluffy Dread, Tower of Sorcery. Nope. It can't be that difficult, surely. It's only one thing. It's not like some of Remington's What the Hell Is That, where you've got to name 17 models and you've only got the fingernail of each one. Let's see. Dino Titan Edition. No, we already had Dreadstone Blight. So that was wrong. Rob Lloyd Sweet says Dwarf Hold Fortress Thing. Well, we have a winner. It is the Dwarf Fortress, and here is a picture as evidence. There we go. A piece of terrain. I actually own one of these, which I keep forgetting to use in my games. But this is back when GW released a lot of this terrain. It's kind of like a foam material it's made out of. Kind of like,
it's quite an old one, isn't it?
It is. This was around about like year 2000-ish. They came out with a lot of pieces like this. And I've still got mine. It's a very nice piece. It wasn't actually that useful in the old fantasy because it takes up a lot of space and it's hard to put models on it. But now, perfect for Age of Sigmar, so I'm going to have to get it out for some games very, very soon, particularly with dwarves. It's going to be
that's great.
A lot of fun indeed. So, Mr. Lloyd Sweet is the winner this week. So his name's going to go onto that prize pool list for next time we have a prize available. And he can be very proud of himself indeed. So, that's the end of that. Now, Mr. Rem, that is how you do. What the hell is that? People don't want any of this 17 different toenails nonsense.
They're short and sweet, then.
Yeah, maybe somewhere in the middle. We don't want it too crazily difficult, because I think people do eventually get bored of typing in the same, 10 models and just misspelling one of them so you don't give it to them. Okay. Are you ready for your second favourite part of the show?
Yes. What could that be, Andy?
Well, if you really want to know, I think you've got a song prepared for this one as well. Here we go.
Oh, wow.
Give us that theme song.
In the Forest of Rem, in the Forest of Rem, where boys become men, in the Forest of Rem, in the Forest of Rem, in the Forest of Rem. I can't think of anything that rhymes with Rem apart from men.
Well, as you may remember from last week, Remington, a travelling bard who's been on quite an adventure and found himself with a couple of serious mutations, including a flesh wand of Slanesh for a big toe. He has a kind of little Zinchi bird head on one of his arms, and he was kidnapped by a group of pygmies last week, and eventually he blew on a mighty horn which released an evil, potentially evil spirit into the treetops, and he was he was called a fool, essentially, for his actions. So, Mr. Remington, the first thing you're going to have to decide this week is whether you're going to try and converse with the released spirits, or whether you're going to maybe pursue the pygmies and the translator that fled into the forest.
What I shall do, Andy, the bird that's grown out the side of my arm has its own personality. And today, that personality is Stu Gibson. So I shall converse with the mutated bird and ask Stu what to do.
Does it sound like a drunk Scotsman by any chance? 'Cause
Yeah.
I've got that
Certainly
covered.
can do.
Yeah. Are you wearing a kilt as well? Hey?
Not yet, no. But
No. Go on then, Stu. What do you think I should do?
What are the options?
Well, at the moment, it seems like the options are do something with the spirit that's just been into the treetops, or try and catch up with some of the fleeing pygmies and maybe have a chat with them, or accidentally kill them, knowing Remington.
I would say follow the spirit.
Ooh.
Well, the birdhead has spoken. Are you going to go with that?
I was going to go for the pygmies, but I shall listen to my bird friend and follow the spirit.
Okay, are you going to try and talk to it, or maybe sing to it?
I shall sing it a song. In fact, I'll ask my bird to chirp to it. Maybe it knows a good spirit song. Go on, Mr. Stu.
Cheers for that. Let's see now.
Come on, you must know some rambling Scottish songs from the Highlands.
I don't think it has to be a rambling Scottish song. I think it could be a series of cheap, cheap, cheeps.
Okay.
Well, I'll go for one that Andy will be familiar with. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo.
Right, I'm going to ask Mr. Remington to roll the dice now.
Here it goes. I've sacked off the skull dive this week, and I'm going for the phone-generated one. Here we go.
Probably wise.
Remington! It's a 4. I keep rolling 4s.
It's a 4. Well, your bird head has successfully beckoned down the spirit from the treetops, and as it comes towards you, you see that it has 2 enormous horns protruding from the side of its head, and it has a kind of a piggish snout it's kind of snarling at you, and it's breathing out smoke. It's partially transparent, you know, like a kind of a bald eagle posing in front of an American flag, kind of transparent, like that, or on an inspirational picture of someone's cat in the background of some mountains. That level of transparency is what we're looking at here. So this spirit, it doesn't have any legs, it just comes down into like a plume of smoke on the ground. It lowers itself to your level, and it moves right up to your face, and it kind of snorts in your general direction. You have successfully beckoned it down. What will you say to it now?
Ooh, what is my destiny? I shall ask thee.
What is whose destiny? Your destiny?
Yes.
You're asking the spirit what its own destiny is.
No, I'm asking the spirit, what's my destiny? What's Remington's destiny?
Okay, what is the destiny of Remington, then?
Mm-hmm.
It stares deeply into your eyes. You must do battle with me. Winner take all. You blew the horn of corn. At this point, it reaches over its semi-transparent body and pulls out an enormous axe dripping with ethereal blood onto the forest floor, which seems to singe the undergrowth ever so slightly. He holds the axe aloft.
Okay.
Which weapon will you wield to meet this challenge?
I'm going to just twist myself to the side and show this creature the bird on my arm and say, it wasn't me, it was him.
Roll the dice. See how convincing you are.
Oh, God. It's a 1.
Classic Remington roll.
Caw, you're on your own, mate. Caw.
Yes. At this stage, the bird sprouts tiny wings and flies off into the treetops. It might be back at some point, but for now, you're on your own. The bird is just perched up on the top of a tree, just looking down and enjoying the view. At this point, the spirit swings the axe in your general direction. If you were to stand still, it would completely cleave you in two, no doubt. What will you do? Will you attempt to counter the blow with a well-placed groin strike, perhaps, even though it clearly doesn't have any legs yet? Will you try and dodge out the way? Will you strum it a tune on your mandolin for some reason?
My mandolin's been a deadly weapon this whole scenario, this whole adventure quest. So I'm going to deflect it with my mandolin.
Well, roll the dice. Let's see how powerful that mandolin really is.
Oh, God.
Have you rolled another one? Oh, God. Okay. The mandolin shatters into a million pieces, and you're left holding a string. However, even though the mandolin is destroyed, the axe only grazes your abdomen, so there's a very slight wound across you now. But your mandolin is completely destroyed, and you are virtually weaponless at this stage. The creature reaches back, and he prepares to take another swing downward, which could cleave your skull in two if you don't move out the way.
I'm going to shout up to Stu, take his eyes out, take his eyes out.
Does the bird of Zench heed his call and attempt to peck the spiritual eyes out of this demon?
Caw, you must be having a laugh. Caw.
Remington!
Yeah.
Roll the
They will.
dice to see how convincing you are.
It's a 5.
It's a 5.
Oh.
Very well. The bird swoops down, letting out a caw, and it plucks one of the eyeballs from the realm of some kind of spirit into reality, and a small cry of agony is let out from the demon. And that part of its face seems to no longer be transparent. Can't see through it anymore, and it's now kind of moving into reality, and slowly the entire demon's body fully forms before you. Legs with hooves on the end. It stamps the ground, and it seems to have been made angry, but that may have made it more vulnerable, because it's no longer partially ethereal.
Right, do I still have a giant foot?
You still have a flesh wand in place of one of your big toes, yes.
All right, I'm going to go for the knackers.
You're going to try and kick him in the cornate gonads
You betcha.
with your flesh wand. Roll the dice.
Here comes the pain corn. Remington! It's another 5.
That's pretty good. The flesh wand, sharp and pointy as it is, pierces the flesh around the groinal corn region. And he lets out another almighty cry, and blood and skull fragments start to ooze out of this kind of cornate sack that was dangling near his legs. It seems like you've done some serious damage, but he's still about to swing that axe down on you. It doesn't seem to have quite as much potency anymore, but he is going to do it. So I am going to open my dice rolling app right here, and we're going to see what kind of blow he can land on you in his wounded state. I'm going to put a -1 modifier on this dice roll because he's wounded. So here we go.
Yes. It's
Roll the
all
2. So that is a critical failure for the demon. He brings down the axe with all his might, and Remington nonchalantly just kind of matrixes off to the side. The axe swings all the way down, and because he's so tall, he actually swings it right the way through, cleaving himself in two from the groin up. What a way to go. The two halves of the demon split apart. Blood forming between them, blood and guts spewing out as the halves splat onto the forest floor. At this point, you start to feel a strange sensation in your head. The center of your forehead seems to be mutating somehow, like something is trying to escape from the bone itself. Roll the dice.
I'm not sure what to do, what this will do, but I'm just going to go Remington, and I roll a 2.
Well, a small horn emerges from the centre of your forehead. It's about, let's say, 3 inches long. It's quite sharp, but it's not that impressive. You also notice that the bird of Zench has retaken its perch on your arm. You are now wielding multiple mutations. Is there any stopping Mr. Remington? All that remains now is to decide whether you're going to maybe chase after those long-gone pygmies, or whether you're going to make a push for that cave on the map.
I've always fancied myself as a pygmy king. So I think returning to the tribe, with my gifts, will only prove my kinghood.
So you're going to try and track down the pygmies with your freshly sprouted horn in the middle of your forehead.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see exactly what happens in that forest trek towards the pygmy village next week, as Remington finds himself a champion, presumably of Khorne, on top of the championhood of Zench and Slaanesh. He's turning into quite the champion of chaos, isn't he? This Remington character.
I don't think they're going to love me too much when I go back home and they see this monster before them.
I don't know. It depends if they're a fan of flesh ones.
I've sort of killed all my friends already, haven't I? So
you accidentally killed most people. I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out you accidentally killed your own mentor the way you roll. Even though you're technically trying to find out who murdered him among this collecting chaos boons for some reason.
Dice Miniature Paint Guy says, Rem is horny. You got me in one there, my friend. Mickey Genva says, do you need to get some flock before you confront the pygmies? It's always good to flock a pygmy.
You may have to collect some on your way through the forest next week.
All I need to know is, to get my blowpipe out.
You certainly do. Maybe you can earn one from the pygmies in a game of cards or something. Think of the possibilities for next week, folks. That's going to be something for the permanent comments after the show, actually. If you're not watching this live, then obviously you can leave those comments right now. What would you like to see Mr. Remington do to interact with the pygmy village next week? Because it's going to be juicy. Right, the last order of business now. We're just going to look at some of the wonderful paintwork that's come in on the Andy and Rem Show Facebook group, which if you're not a member of, you certainly should be. So, here we go. Let's start with this batch of chaos from Cameron Thompson.
Ooh,
What do we think of these beasties?
very nice.
Very chaotic.
I
Wow.
like the kind of flame effect he's done on some of the armor pieces. That looks cool.
Is that the Varangard?
Yeah,
You got them, haven't you, Stu?
I do, yeah. Still haven't. Actually, they're still sitting in their sealed box. I haven't touched them.
They're tough, aren't they? They're big
Yeah.
deal.
They are quite beastly, aren't they? The teeth are very, very dark, which is unusual. Normally you see kind of bone-coloured teeth, but I quite like that, actually. It makes a change, doesn't it? Dark teeth
nice.
of evil. This guy's got a very impressive head. Now, if you'd rolled a 6, I think you would have come out with horns like that, probably. Instead of the...
I haven't put the Gorgrunters together yet, so I'm not sure how these guys compare in size to
You're right.
them.
Well, I bet them Varangard's got a good armour save, haven't they? They're pretty much like tanks with hoofs.
Very much so.
It's like no flesh to be seen there. It's just armour.
Next, this is some very nice ethereal paintwork here from Sam Jones. I like this kind of green fade that's going on here. This is much more effective than my Mortis engine, it has to be said. What do you think of this?
Are those GW?
I think it is. It might be converted, but it does look very Hex Wraith-like.
Yeah.
No, they're hex rates. Yeah.
Very, very nice. Although I'm sure some people are going to be driven nuts by the fact he hasn't finished the base edging yet. You know, people like that. Oh, that's a slightly uneven fingernail there as well. That's going to send you down a couple of points, certainly. but that is a very, very nice green fade effect. And I imagine once you know how to do something like that, it depends how he does it, actually. If he's doing it with like a ton of glaze effects, that could take a long time, I imagine. I think people could probably get something similar with an airbrush and dry brushing, but this actually looks like it's quite a lot by hand because you can actually see the transitions a bit more, which suggests that maybe it was done by hand rather than with an airbrush. So I'm going to suggest that this took quite a long time, actually.
It looks quite... the ethereal look seems to be quite a hard kind of thing to get right.
It is very, very tricky. As someone who's tried it, just dry brushing it like you would, let's say, waves in water, it doesn't look exactly right. There is definitely more to it involving the gradual colour changes and the different highlights that some people...
I did do it that way, Andy, as well, but there is an easy way, and that is to base coat it all white and then put the nitrous oxide on it.
What is it with you and this nitrous oxide? Are you some kind of dentist?
That's what it's called.
Of course.
Yeah, close enough, we'll say. This is Natasha Slavinek, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But this is a very, very colourful lizard man and his mount here, or Seraphon, should I say. I really like this effect here. Kind of dark triangle look on the mount.
So colourful.
Do they still call them cold ones for the Seraphon, or do they have a different name now?
Oh, I don't know.
If anyone knows that in the chat, let us know. I like the basing as well.
That's a different cold one, isn't it? The ones... That was like one of the ones that comes with the Dark Elves. Dark Elves.
Does actually. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. It does look like a Dark Elf one.
The Seraphon ones look a little more friendly.
But very, very nice. I like the fact that there's a lot of colour on the cold one and not that much colour on him. I think it draws the eye straight to this beast, which is definitely the most striking part of it. Often people make like the shield the most colourful part of it, but I like the monster being very eye-catching.
Yeah, they still call them cold ones.
Well, they are cold-blooded. Next, this is Danielius Bubnis. And this is obviously some nice blood-bound action going on here. Now, both of you have painted your fair share of chaos, so what do we make of this? What's the verdict on these guys here?
Yeah, the face is great. This is really like he's in agony. I would be too if I had to carry that thing around the world with me.
If I'm sure you've tamed a few beasts in your time, Mr. Remington. Do you think you could tame this one?
That's quite a challenge, that one. I'm not sure if I could handle it.
Okay, next. This is from Mr. Skeleton Flower. Now, this is truly amazing. This is going to be for his ogre army.
Now, I'd definitely take her out on a date.
It actually looks like this model has been created with the Remington kind of flesh glove that he wore for a couple of episodes of the Forest of Rem, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does.
I don't know whether that was intentional, but look at the amount of brush strokes that must have gone into this thing. It's pretty crazy, isn't it?
I think there's definitely some finger sponging going on this model. Do you remember that? My $1 million idea? Because you've forgotten already, haven't you?
No one forgets your $1 million ideas. They just stick in the memory forever. Now, obviously, this thing isn't completely finished yet. The base obviously isn't done. There's bits of white on it. And I imagine the weapon has a bit more work to do on it as well. But even just the skin and the dress is just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, Skeleton's work. I always post his work on the PMP on Google Plus, and his well, you can see for yourself. His standard is really high, but especially his skin and flesh tones are always perfect.
I think if someone's physique was measured in their painting ability, then he would definitely resemble Sigvald as his dream. And finally,
he's wearing a mushroom for a rah-rah dress.
It's kind of like a flower petal, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
This next one isn't so much paintwork. This is Power Chord. I'm going to, again, assume that's not his actual name, but apparently he finished second in an Age of Sigmar tournament in Berlin. So we can only say congratulations on that, and that's a very nice trophy there.
Nice.
He won 16 euros.
That certainly looks that way.
Uber 16 euros.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with that. My knowledge of German isn't that great. I can just about say "where is the ghost" in German, which is going to come in handy, very much so, if I ever visit Germany. But this can't be that cheap a prize, actually, if it's got an actual model on it.
Well, those are priced individually now. All those heroes from the Silver Tower, £15 they are.
Actually, weirdly enough, I actually got one of them yesterday.
Wow.
Which one?
The Excelsior War Priest, the one on that little statue. Because I already bought the Dark Oath Chieftain ages ago, of course.
£15,
I didn't get it.
not that bad.
Yeah, but I got it from eBay though, so it was like $4.
Nice. What made you buy the War Priest?
Well, at some point I plan on going back to the Stormcast Eternals army I painted, and I think I've still got a whole box of flagellants lying around. I thought I'll just get this guy, stick him in there, and maybe pick up one of the war altars, the Sigmar.
Nice.
Add that in as a little kind of sub force.
I'd really like that army fleshed out a bit, you know, with some flagellant heroes and.
I think it will be.
Flagellants carrying something, or just, you know, I don't know what. Flagellant like suicide bombers or something. I don't know.
The mortal forces of Sigmar will definitely be a thing.
Yeah.
At some point, to hang around with their Stormcast buddies. They'll be like the Imperial Guard to the Space Marines.
Yeah, pretty much.
The cannon fodder before like the serious troops that they actually care about going there. And I'm looking forward to see how they're going to look. I imagine they'll look somewhat like the old kind of Sigmar priests, perhaps. Maybe with a bit more, some kind of twist on them, though, because every race now has something that makes it stand out from the old. So it remains to be seen. Well, it doesn't look like we're going to get anything else new for Age of Sigmar for a few weeks now. We had 1 or 2 models and a couple of re-released terrain pieces, but it does seem like very much that we're going to wait until the new year.
Shame.
So what are we going to do till then?
Total War it, I say.
I think it's pretty much going to have to be that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what they bring out. You say Bretonnians and what else, but, you know, the elves have got to play a part somehow. And in the game of Dwarves I played, I took a boat and I tried to sail all the way west to try and find Ulthuan. But it only let me get to a certain point. So then I went north until my lord was killed because of the chaos winds were decimating the troops. So it's quite
when you're out at sea, just a lot of people tightly packed in there with a very limited diet. The chaos winds will do you in eventually.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much they can do. You know, they've got dark elves, high elves, Skaven.
Yes, Skaven will be an interesting one because they obviously fit very much into the area that they've already uncovered on the map.
Yeah, ogres. You know, and then obviously the lizard men. They're on a different continent altogether.
I want to see kind of a wandering halflings army.
Well,
they don't have to have their own playable faction, but just to have halflings there as little army you can just crush and take over the moot.
Well, maybe you could have the halfling hot pot in the Empire army. That'd be funny.
Yeah, they should do something with Dogs of War, I'm sure. They could just release individual regiments for 99 pence each. Well,
they have regiments of renown. Once you get a lord to a certain level, you can purchase regiments of renown in your army. And one of them is the Goblobber catapult for the dwarves, which is pretty cool.
I'd like to see some of the old pikemen and the dwarf slayer pirates and so on.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff would be fun to see in there.
You don't.
I'd love to see the what are they called? The Birdmen.
Yeah.
Birdmen of Catrazar or something like that. That'd be cool.
Alcaraz, I think it was.
Was it?
Birdmen of Alcatraz. Yeah.
Very, very exciting times ahead. And for Age of Sigmar, we'll have to wait for the new year for the very, very exciting times when hopefully we're finally going to get the Steamhead Dwarden that everyone's itching for. I know I am. I've got like a small pool of money set aside that every passing week, it's more and more tempting to just spend it on a Stardrake instead of waiting for the Dwarden. So they better hurry up, or that money isn't going to be there when it rolls around.
You know you're going to end up buying a Stardrake, and then the following week the pictures will be leaked.
Maybe that's why I should buy the Stardrake, because that would actually force them to hurry up with the Dwarden, like confronting the curse head on.
That would take you ages to paint that, wouldn't it?
With dry brushing, I don't know. Might not take that long. Okay, I think it's time to wrap this one up. So let's see if anyone's got any interesting comments in the chat before we go. Yeah, people are looking forward to Skaven in Total War. Newbie wants to see Skaven versus Lizardmen. Yeah, was there much of a Skaven presence in Lustria?
Yeah, they're underground.
Did they invade Lustria, the Skaven?
At the end times, yeah, they did. They were the ones that destroyed it, I think.
Interesting. Because obviously they're not quite at the whole end times levels in Total War, are they?
No.
The Skaven, in the old world, the Skaven were everywhere, weren't they? They had tunnels all over the place.
And you know rats can get anywhere. They just have to sneak onto a ship, and they'll be in all four corners of the globe in no time.
Right, I've got to get going, guys.
Yep, it's time to wrap this one up. So are you ready to play us out? Of course, thanks to the audience for joining us. Don't forget to like the video. And if you feel like leaving a permanent comment later on, go nuts. Hopefully there won't be any technical issues with the repeat, if you will, of this video when you watch the recording later on, like last week where it decided to desync the audio by about 10 minutes. Luckily, there was nothing controversial said before the show, though, that made it out into the airwaves. And, of course, we thank Mr. Stu for joining us and providing some valuable insight.
No problem, guys. Always a pleasure.
And we pass things over to the music maestro himself, Mr. Remington, to play us out for another week.
When it's just you and Stu, what you gonna do? Yes, you, me, and Stu. What we gonna do? We're gonna play all the things we have, like video games. Just you and Stu. What you gonna do apart from present a Warhammer show? When it's just you and Stu, the song gets worse every week. Yes, indeed, it gets worse every week, just like Stu's beak.
The song gets worse and worse. Let's cart it off in a hearse.